Now, I think there's a fairly fascinating insight there into how a very complex building is being constructed. And we may judge whether it might be possible to do it at all with the same degree of accuracy if BIM wasn't available. One of the things that struck me, looking at some of the photographs there, is the apparent economy of materials. It looked a very, very light structure for the size, and it appeared to me that it probably was possible to design it in a way that minimized the sheer tonnage of steel and concrete that went into it. And I wonder if that is the case, and if it is feasible to obtain better levels of tolerance, let's say, and a tighter fit in all of the components in the building, whether that can knock on to the design and perhaps influence the factors of safety that can be achieved, if you like, in the overall context of the design. I just wonder about that. Maybe we may get some comment later on. But certainly it is, it very much looks to be the way of the future. And I, for one, am convinced, after seeing, what I did see this morning and hearing the presentations, that this is a technology, I think, that's going to go on and on. We move on, I think, probably to questions and answers now. We have some time. I'm sure there are there are a number of questions that people will want to address to the speakers, so I'll invite you to put those forward.
I suppose a question both for Cray and for Fisher. I was just wondering, once you had the model, did you use that in any way to go to fabrication, or did it stop at design stage, and then what happened then?
The way we worked, we had Fisher's model. Effectively, we drew our precast onto that model. In terms of the manufacturer side, we extracted all our mold drawings directly from the model, and they were issued to the factory then. In terms of the reinforcement was done RC CAS, because we had more guys that could step in and do that rather than tying up the skilled detailers. Does that answer your question, sort of what you were saying, how do we use the model in terms of?
Yeah, I was just wondering, once you've got your design complete, what's the next step in terms of getting the fabrication of the units? Is the model driving the fabrication directly, or is there another step in between the model and the fabrication?
Literally, as the guys will just extract production drawings directly from it. They'll number the pieces once they've got it finalised, and then they just extract that out, and that creates our mould drawing, which goes to if it's a steel fabricated mould or if it's timber or whatever, that goes directly to the factory, like that.
Thank you.
Just from a steel point of view, the 3D modelling is a key element of our manufacturing process. We use it as a tool to get the information from the design drawings onto the shop floor for the welder to start welding bits of steel together. The 3D model, we actually export digital or CNC data from the 3D model, and we send that into the workshop, so that whenever the steel beam comes in to be cut, the guy operating the machine doesn't tell the machine cut this beam 3 meters long. It's actually CNC data coming from the 3D model that tells the machine to cut the beam 3 meters long, and that then goes to the drill line. And if there's 4 holes to be drilled in a cluster, again, the operator does not set those out. Again, that's all CNC data coming straight from the model. So the 3D model is a key element of our manufacturing process. So it is, and that's without it, we couldn't make steel. Okay.
Just a question to the three guys, really. BAM mentioned that they used Revit, and the other two guys mentioned you used Tekla, and you all mentioned that you combined the models. Were there difficulties in doing that between interoperability between the systems, or is it an easy process?
As long as we're getting 3D information, generally, most of the systems that we find consultants are using is it works with Navisworks. So Navisworks is the integrator of all of the differing models. It's a viewer, so it doesn't have as much intelligence as if you were building a Revit model. But Revit, whilst it's a great tool, it needs everybody to use it if you're going to build a Revit model. We do build Revit models with our own designers because they're all using Revit, and then you get spin-offs from that. But in the main, 90% of our business is with other consultants who are using all different systems. But Navisworks, in the main, is fine.
So even though you weren't exactly able to combine the models together as one, you still were able to achieve all these savings and benefits?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thanks.
I just have a question for Adrian. You mentioned in your presentation you've been doing this for 20 years as a steel fabricator. Did it make any difference on this project that you received a design model as a starting point, or you had the other elements of the works modeled? Presumably before you were just modeling your own element of the works.
Yes, historically, and as I said, there's no historically what we have found is that in previous years or decades or whatever, how far back you want to go, that whenever our primary source of information is the structural engineer, so it is, what we have found is that historically the models that were used by structural engineers were analytical models. They were not necessarily spatial models. So if a structural engineer was designing a building on a 7-metre grid, he knew what size his beam needed to be. If for some reason the grid changed to 7.05 or a column had to move 50 mil to the left, it really didn't matter in structural terms that that column had moved 50 mil or 25 mil or 10 mil. So what we found is that we have been, historically we would have been offered models and we would have refused to take them because we would rather build our own model from 2D drawings, because that way we had the confidence and we were setting the building out exactly as it had to be. Because we ourselves, whenever we're in our old system of StruCAD, if a beam moved 100 mil and you'd already generated your drawing, hands up, you would go in and you just change the dimension. So, but we would say that our drawings have to use the dimensions, they are not digitally correct. But things have moved on a lot in the last number of years, and consulting engineers and architects, they're now building their models to get them, because their software is now much more user-friendly, that they know the models are going to be used for setting out purposes, so their accuracy has increased significantly. Even at that, we're still a wee bit of the old school that we would still prefer to use drawings if possible. But on the Leeds Arena, it was just impossible to get some of the geometry onto 2D drawings. Does that answer your question?
Thank you for wonderful 3 presentations this morning. I have a question for you, Chris, just about, you mentioned we need strong client interest in the project. I just wonder, could you tell us a little bit about that aspect on the Leeds Arena? Thank you.
I think, to be fair, on the Leeds Arena, the client never drove anything. As far as, we'd won the project a year before we started. We'd spent a year negotiating the second stage, so the client thought that we were just going to go down a normal route. and probably didn't know what BIM meant. I mean, probably 18 months ago, not many people knew what BIM meant anyway, unless you were looking at what was going on in the States. So it's all fairly new. When I meant leadership, I meant leadership from inside, and client leadership is in essence the public sector by government saying you must. But we interestingly enough have had this week our first pre-qualification document coming for a £200 million project, and part of the criteria is that the words that the document uses, the contractor will use full BIM. So it's now being, it's coming to us, excuse me, as a dictate, which is no bad thing.
Just to say, we have a question here on Twitter from Malachi Matthews in DIT. With the use of BIM models by contractors, is there a temptation to change the designer's intent to suit? I don't know which one of you wants to answer that.
Why is it nobody trusts a contractor? I think what we try and do is to make sure it works, and to make sure we take as much waste out of it as we can. We mentioned that we took 8% of the steelwork out from the design model because it wasn't required. So if we can modify the design to take stuff out without changing things, then that's what we'll do. But we're not in the world of just trying to take money out and change specifications and things like that. We just want it to work, really.